back to the AWS DevOps training. In today's session, we are going to understand what are the different AWS storage services that are present out in the market, and we are going to understand what is S3 and what is that particular service and do a very quick hands-on on that. So this should be a very quick session because S3 has got its own abilities on the AWS console to have a variety range of features. So we are going to jump very quickly into the console and see that. But before that, let's have some theoretical understanding on what is this S3 and what are the multiple storage services available. So coming back to the AWS storage services, on AWS we are having a different storage service like AWS Backup, EFS, Elastic Disaster Recovery, FSX, S3, S3 Glacier, and Storage Gateway. So these are the storage services out in AWS as of today. So this can be growing more based on the time what AWS develops its storage services. So you can get into AWS console and start typing storage, and you can see all these particular services available. But currently we are going to much focus on S3, and rest all the services we might get those utilizing in our what do you say day-to-day DevOps use cases, which we'll be doing after this training. So we'll be focusing much on S3 for today's session, and we are going to see a little bit hands-on on that. So S3 is nothing but a simple storage service. If you get into what is an S3, S3 is nothing but a place on AWS where you can store your data in the form of an object. So according to S3, whatever the data that is coming into its area is not, they treat it as an object. An object can be a file, it can be a document, it can be an image, it can be a video, it can be an audio, it can be any kind of type of the data that is coming in the form of an object. So it stores in the cloud under a folders. It's called as buckets. Okay, so in AWS we call it as buckets, which is nothing but under buckets you can have multiple objects, you can have the folder structures under that, and you can place all your data into it. So you can create n number of buckets in your AWS account, and you can place a data inside that particular buckets, and you can access that buckets whenever it is needed. If you see this architecture diagram on this, so this says that there is a business application. They want to store analytics, log files, application data, videos and pictures, and some kind of data into Amazon S3, and they are getting benefited of these particular features. Okay, rather than storing it on-premise, when they move it to S3, they have the control on the data. They can do some analytics. They can do some retrieval mechanisms. They can protect their data. They can have some lifecycle policies. There'll be a number of features that will be available for the data that is present in S3. This is a simple use case that we got from the AWS documentation. So coming back to the S3 components, so there are many other components other than this, but these are the major attributes that you need to understand in S3. So buckets or objects, as we already seen, buckets are nothing but the root items under S3 where you will be creating the buckets. Under buckets you will be placing the files, or under the folders you will be placing the files, and each and every file or each and every item under that particular folders we call it as an object. An object refers to a file, it refers to a video, it refers to an audio, a piece of information that you upload into S3. This bucket policy speaks about the information that is written on the bucket, which is saying who can access this particular bucket. So bucket policies always secure the bucket based on the access that is provided to it. So lifecycle policy speaks about what is the aging of your data that you are putting in, what you want to do of this particular data if it is not frequently accessed, what you want to do if it is not frequently accessed since a year or so. So what you are going to do with that particular data. So what are you going to move it into, or you into a different storage class, or you're going to move it into delete that particular data, or what you're going to do. So all this comes into your lifecycle policy. It's nothing but a life cycle of a particular file. If after loading the particular file, after 30 days, move it into somewhere else. After 90 days, you delete. After 1 year, you just do this. So all this particular information, you are going to put it in the lifecycle policies. Much important whenever you are going out for an interview, or whenever you are going for AWS certification exam, because storage classes speaks about in what class you are storing your data. Like for example, if you are placing your file in an S3 bucket, you should select what is the class of it. So we'll see that particular in details. And then versioning is nothing but you are going to maintain the versions of a particular file. Let us say today you have uploaded a file .txt with some particular informations like hello, and tomorrow you have uploaded the same file which has overwritten and just has another information. So if you want to go back to the previous file, so you can have this versioning enabled. You will have the all the versions that you have uploaded to that particular file, and you can go back to the any version at any given point of time. So server-side encryption is pretty much important again. So this encryption says that what encryption that S3 bucket is storing your data. Like for example, you upload your data into cloud at a particular S3 bucket inside as an object. So you are saying AWS that hey, whenever the data is present at rest, you want to encrypt that data so that when someone tries to access it, only the authorized persons can only access it. So you are going to encrypt that. Server-side encryption is nothing but AWS will encrypt your data. You can also provide your own keys for encryption of data, and you can retrieve it by the time, you can decrypt it by the time of retrieval. So we can see this particular option in action whenever we are or on the AWS console. And data transfer acceleration is another interesting part, that let us say on your S3 bucket, the retrieval time of a particular object is, let us say, 1 second. By enabling this data transfer acceleration, it will be into a milliseconds. So this feature will be enabled on the bucket at an extra additional cost, so that for example, if there is a bucket in which you want the retrieval time should be very less, with a very less latency, because the users don't want to see any kind of latency at this particular time, you will have this data transfer acceleration enabled, so that buckets will have the lowest time for the retrieval. And this event notification access logging itself says that you will be notified for some events on S3. So in AWS, whatever the operation you do, creating a bucket, deleting a bucket, launching an instance, everything we call it as an event. So event notification is nothing but on S3 you can see, you can get a notification if someone uploads, you can get a notification when someone deletes, or any event happened on the S3 bucket, you can get the notifications. And access logging speaks about what is the particular log you want to make on that particular uh, uh, S3 bucket, or who have accessed that S3 bucket, and who is trying to access, what happened that particular request and all. You can access that into using this access logging. So this S3 storage classes, as we discussed earlier, these are the different storage classes for a particular object. So storage class will be applied for an object on an S3 bucket. On a bucket level, you are going to apply this storage classes, or whenever you are going to upload an object, you can have a prefix also enable, like these prefixes can have this particular class. But understand this storage class clearly, like whenever you are suggesting a solution for a particular application or a business use case, you need to provide a right storage class. If you see, let us take for an example, a standard storage class says that it's a default storage class with high durability and performance and suitable for frequently accessed data. So if the data which you are putting in an S3 bucket, you are accessing it frequently and number of times, you are going to get that without any latency. Okay, and if you are selecting an intelligent tiering storage class, it says that it will automatically move the objects which are not frequently accessed to a different storage class to optimize your costs. Okay, so this is there is one more storage class like standard infrequent access. So this will says that, like for example, if you are storing a backup files from your application, there are backup files you want to store, some log files you want to store, where you very less frequently you access that. Whenever it is needed to debug some issue, you will be accessing that. So such scenarios you can use the standard infrequent access. And one zone IA, so there is one storage class called one zone infrequent access. It says that your files will be placed only in a single availability zone. So this make a little bit less durable, because if that availability zone is down, you might not be able to access your data. So this will be at a low cost. So all this compared to the standard will be at the higher cost, and S3 Glacier Deep Archive Instant Retrieval at the last will be at the lower cost. So all this based on your use case you need to select. And there is one more feature called Glacier. Glacier is nothing but an extremely low cost one on S3, where it is not $1 for an object, or a particular gigs of data you are storing in S3. So this says that if you are having an data on an S3 bucket, like a backup, it's a long term backup. You don't want to access this frequently at all, like once in a year, twice in a year, or like even if you're okay, if you are trying to retrieve that, even after with a latency for a couple of hours or something, even if you can able to retrieve that file, if you are okay, then you can go for Glacier. You need not to pay standard fund for that. Like for example, you are storing your server backup. Okay, after patching, after doing a patch management of your server, if you want to store your server backup in S3, you need not to pay for standard. You can go for Glacier class, so that your cost will be very low. So this Glacier Deep Archive is also one. So it has recently launched by AWS. This is the lowest storage class in S3, because this is even more very rarely what do you say accessed. You can select this, and this S3 outpost is nothing but, for example, if you are having a storage on your AWS, what do you say, on your on-premise, you are having some data centers. S3 outpost is nothing but it will enable your infrastructure like an S3. Okay, like it's a hybrid cloud scenarios. Like you have a data center, you are enabling AWS, and you are putting a tool like installing a CLI or something like that, and making your own data center as an S3. So it's like a hybrid, and it's an extended one between your on-premise and AWS infrastructure. And S3 intelligent tiering archive access, it's the similar thing. It says that it will move your data to your archive state based on the rarely accessed stuff and all. And there is one more thing for Glacier, as we discussed earlier. It is for extremely low cost and archival storage. And S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval is also launched recently. So this is a bit higher cost compared to Glacier, because Glacier will have some time when it trying to retrieve the information, but Glacier Instant Retrieval will store your data in the form of an archived files with a lower cost, but there will be a slightly higher cost compared to Glacier, because this can be retrieved immediately as you retrieve on the standard class. And S3 Deep Archive Instant Retrieval is nothing but a same thing which we compared to Glacier. It's also on the Glacier Deep Archive. You are having a deep archive. It will be stored at a place where infrequently accessed data and all. So, but a retrieval will be instant. So compared to Glacier, S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval will be at a higher cost, and S3 Glacier Deep Archival Instant Retrieval will be at a higher cost compared to Glacier Deep Archive. So these are the different storage classes we have. So you need not to mug up all this particular kind of stuff when you are going for an AWS DevOps engineer job and all. But you need to understand, and you need to have an idea that whenever you are suggesting or architecting a solution based on the storage that you want to put for your application, you need to have the clear understanding. Okay, so AWS is having some storage classes. Based on my application business need, I need to select the storage class. If I'm storing the database backups, let's go for an archive, because I'm not going to get access it frequently. But when I'm storing the information of a particular files which is responsible for my website, let's go for standard, because I want an immediate retrieval of that. If I want a particular log information, let's go for what do you say, standard infrequent access, or let's set up an intelligent tiering. So based on that business use case, you need to understand and architect a solution in such a way that it will get in line with your business use case. These are the different types that you need to understand on this, so that you can try to suggest a solution on S3 using the storage classes. Now let's see some of the implementations of Glacier, or let's see some other AWS S3 features that we have. So as we discussed, S3 Glacier storage class is something we do like this. So archival data will be uploaded into S3, and based on your classes, you can just select whatever the class that is better meant for your use case, like S3 Glacier Instant Retrieval, or Flexible Retriever, or Deep Archive. So select that, and your data will be saved on S3 with that particular what do you say, the selection of class. And getting to AWS Snowball. So AWS Snowball is nothing but it's a physical device. Okay, so this Snowball is a physical device. Let us say, for example, you are having a particular data. It's a huge amount of data you want to migrate to S3. Okay, you are not you will not be relying, like for example, you are having a terabytes of data you want to upload to S3. You cannot use the internet connection for that. So at that particular time, you can order a snowball from AWS. So it will be reaching to your destination. You can connect to your data center and securely migrate the data to snowball. Then it will prepare the devices for, it will get to you, and when the devices arrives, you can just put on your data, and when ready, ship it back to AWS, and upon arrival, AWS will transfer that data into S3. Then you can just check on AWS console whether your data has been migrated or not. Because on your on-premise, like for example, there are multiple gigs of data, terabytes of data. You cannot simply sit and upload that data with 100 gigs or 1 gig or 100 gigs of internet. There might be an issue at some time, like your network outage will be there. So those such scenarios, AWS will provide a device which will be shipped to your location. If you order from AWS console, there will be a separate, you can set up a customer support call, and they will you can order a snowball, it comes to your location. It's a physical device. You can just get into YouTube and just search about AWS snowball. There will be some AWS videos, it how it looks like. It looks like a kind of a hard disk, but it comes to you, connect to your devices or connect to your thing, and there will be a detailed explanation how you can connect and how you can migrate your data. So this is how an on-premise, a typical on-premise migrations works. So in real time, this is how it works. Like a huge data centers, let us say in US or in India, you are having a huge data centers and you want to migrate your data. This typically works. This is how generally the big organizations migrate the data from on-premise to cloud. They don't rely on internet all the time. They use the snowball service for getting the AWS snowball onto their location, migrate the data, and they check the migration on the dashboards provided by AWS, and then they will see if their data is uploaded to S3 or not. This is one of the useful service. You might get this more into your certification questions, this AWS Snowball, but not really on the interviews that you get these questions, because I don't see much people using this Snowball, because this is a one-time activity. So it's not like an ongoing activity that people deploy some resources for doing this. So it's a one-time activity. So it's majorly important for your implementation or providing a solution for the business use case or the clients. Coming to this AWS storage gateway, so this storage gateway is also a service provided by AWS to have a integration between on-premise and the S3 buckets. If you see here, there is an on-premise where you are having the files, application servers, backups. So using these protocols, it will enable the storage gateway and endpoints using VPC to access the S3 files and all. Okay, so you are having data on premise using storage gateway or service endpoints. It can be access, it can access the files on S3 using the similar kind of mechanisms like NFS protocol or SMB protocols, or it can be some kind of what do you say, transits and all. So this will have an integration between your on-premise and cloud storage. So that's why we call it as a storage gateway, where you have the data transfer between from your on-premise onto your AWS using the storage gateway. Okay, so let's get into some hands-on on S3, because going forward the sessions we discuss, because we had enough theory on the compute and we had enough theory on storage. So now we will have an S3 hands-on. But going forward, there will be more of a hands-on, and whenever there is required, I'll be covering the theories. But most of the things going forward will be a hands-on. And once this training series is completed, the most important topics will come up, the business use cases. The major idea behind our training series is to have the business use cases learning to the users. It's not like get into the theory and learn the AWS components and DevOps components and that's end. No, this series speaks about that particular use cases, like what you are loading and like how you are implementing in real time. So I'm going to bring up some real time use cases on AWS and the DevOps, and we are going to solve in real time, and we are going to learn how to solve and implement such scenarios. So let's have some S3 hands-on right now by building some very static web hosting. This is a classic example that generally people utilize for learning S3, but let's do it. But later on, by end of this particular series, we are going to integrate this S3 to many other DevOps use cases and many other AWS use cases while building the relevant applications as well. So let's get into the AWS console and start building this static web hosting by following these steps, like setting up the website endpoints, enabling website hosting, and configuring an index document, and setting up permissions for website access. We are going to follow these steps. We are going to see on the console, and then we are going to learn all the stuff. Okay, so now I have logged into my AWS console. Let me get into S3. Even you can check on this, click on services. As we discussed earlier, under compute, we have learnt about EC2, and on the storage, we have also seen. Let me click on storage. You can see S3. So this is how you can just see all the storage services that we discussed earlier. But let me click on S3. So it will log into the S3 console, where you can see the multiple options like buckets, access points, object lambda access points, multi-region access points, batch operations. So these are the multiple options that are present on what do you say, the AWS S3. But let me quickly create the bucket. So this account I was having earlier, so I have a couple of buckets that I have used it earlier. But whenever you launch your free tier account, you don't have any buckets. So let's go ahead and create a bucket. So bucket name should be unique across the globe on the AWS internet. I mean to say AWS S3. So let me give a bucket name, your own bucket name. So but that must be unique across AWS. So let me try to provide a bucket name like Manish AWS DevOps hyphen training. Let me check if that is available. Okay, it's available. So you can copy settings from existing bucket, but that is optional. If you have an bucket that already created, you can choose that particular bucket to get all the settings like SSC, I mean to say encryptions and something other settings, whatever you set for this particular bucket. And when I speak about this object ownership, it's a older generation, like how you're going to control your objects under the S3 bucket, but ACLs are not recommended now. So access control lists for buckets are not recommended. So I'm just skipping this for now. And because always the objects which are put in this particular bucket will be owned by the bucket owner or nothing but the person who has logged in. So this block public access settings for this bucket. So this says that you will not all the objects that are present in this S3 bucket are not public. If you enable this, then you can access publicly. So I'm just disabling this by default because I don't want the public access right now. When I'm demonstrating the static host web hosting using S3, I'll enable that. So let me scroll down. This is the bucket versioning which we were discussing earlier. Let me enable this so that if I upload multiple files, I can see how that, what do you say, how this versioning can be seen. So tags are optional. Tags are nothing but you provided a tag for this particular bucket so that you can see like for example name, department and something like that. And this is what the default encryption which we discussed earlier. It was by default it's server side encryption on Amazon S3. So Amazon will ensure like your objects once stored in S3 will be encrypted at rest. But also you can implement server side encryption with AWS KMS. KMS is a key management services provided by AWS where there will be a key pair. Using that key pair also it can encrypt. And there is some dual layer server side encryption with AWS DSSC KMS. So KMS in detail we are going to see this service, but ensure this KMS is nothing but a key management service that provide you a client secret and access key where you can encrypt your objects on S3. But for default I'll be choosing this server side encryption with Amazon S3. So this is the bucket key. I'm just keeping it enabled. Just a second. By default for this SSE, let me click on the object settings. So object lock is nothing but this will ensure that you will not rewrite or overwrite any file on an S3 bucket, but I'm just going to keep it disabled because I'll be checking the versioning. Okay, let me click on create bucket now. Let me check on the top. It successfully created the bucket. You can click on Amazon S3 and you can see there is a bucket called create. There is a bucket Manish AWS DevOps training got created. Let me click on that. get into the buckets, click on that. You can see all those options. So you have an option for an upload. Let me upload a particular file. Okay, so let me try uploading a file onto this S3 bucket. If you click on upload, you can see options for files and folders. You can add the folders directly or you can add the files. You can see this is the destination, the S3 bucket, and these are the destination details and all. You can see the permissions and the properties of the storage class and all. So these are the storage class. You can select in what storage class you can upload your file. Okay, so while uploading, like let us say for example I want to upload my file, the desktop. Let me get into the repo. I'm just selecting this text.txt file, and while I'm selecting, I can select the storage class what we have discussed earlier. Okay, so for now I'll just utilize the standard, but you can also use multiple storage classes based on your use case. So that's more like what you select when you are uploading. Let's click on upload. You can see the file has got uploaded, or it's getting uploaded. Its upload succeeded. Now you can go to the files and folders of close this. Just click on objects. You can see there is test.txt file got uploaded. So this is how you can upload the files. There are many other ways. I'll be doing a detailed session on AWS CLI, like how you can interact to AWS and how you can, whatever the things you're doing on the console can be done by a CLI. So we'll be doing that. Also we can do by SDKs like Python. So we'll be having a detailed session on AWS SDK using Boto 3. But for now, let's understand that this is a bucket. In the bucket, you have uploaded an object. So you have multiple actions, like if you select this, you have delete, download, and copy S3 URL, copy the URL, and actions. You can just do a lot of things on this. So if you click on properties, you have many other options. Let us say for example you want to host a website on this, a static website. Let us say a static website in which just printing an hello world. You want to use this rather than utilizing an EC2 instance. You can also use this S3 bucket for doing such. For that, what you need to do is let's understand some properties on this. So this is a bucket overview that you can get. And bucket versioning, as we discussed here, you can get an option of enabled or disabled. These are tags. This is a default encryption that we have set up. And intelligent tiering archive configurations, you can see create a configuration. So based on that configuration, whatever you have given, so objects will be moved into an archival storage class based on the configuration. And server access logging, you can enable this, like clicking on enable. You need to select an S3 bucket wherein you can place all your logs, like who access this bucket and all. Ensure you are not putting the same S3 bucket, because it will be what do you say, it will be confusing, like who accessed it and all, because even when it try to put the log, it treats as an access. So always select a different bucket. So let me cancel this. Let me scroll down. So default encryption, intelligent tiering, and server access logging. So AWS CloudTrail data events is nothing but AWS CloudTrail is another service which it gives the detailed information about the events that happened on AWS. So we will see in the metrics and the logging and management section on AWS. But understand this, AWS CloudTrail data events is nothing but it gives the detailed list of the events what happened. Okay, and even notifications that we discussed earlier, it can send us emails, or it can set up some notifications to other services when some event happens on S3. Amazon Event Bridge also will speak in detail about this. So transfer acceleration, what we discussed earlier, if you enable the transfer acceleration, this will ensure like use an accelerated endpoint for faster data transfers. And object lock, as we discussed, it's disabled. And requester pace, it's nothing but whenever you enable this requester pace, so let us say there is a request coming from a different AWS account, for downloading that or for retrieving the information, they are going to pay that, not you. So this is one for that. And this is static web hosting, what we are discussing. Let's enable this static web hosting so that we can host this Amazon S3 bucket for a simple static web host. So let me click edit on this and click enable, and say like hosting type, I want to host a static website, I don't want to use for a redirect for an object. So whenever you are hosting a static website, it asks for a index.html file on a root directory, or if you are in a different place, you can just place like this. Like for example, it's in a folder one, like folder one slash index.html, but I want to place it at the root index.html. Okay, and I don't want to place any error.html right now. I don't want to have any root redirection rules for now, but I'll just save the changes. Okay, so it should saved edited static web hosting. It got saved. After that, let me get into permissions. So permissions, it says that backend and objects are not public. So what you need to do is you need to disable this block on public access, because we will be accessing this bucket publicly using the web browser. So let me block all public access. This is not generally we do actually in an organization, but for testing or understanding the S3, let's do this. Give a confirm for this. Once this is done, let's scroll down and the bucket policy. So let me add a bucket policy. I have already have a bucket policy handy on my GitHub account. Let us say this is my bucket policy, which will ensure, okay, so which will ensure who can have the access for this bucket. Bucket policies are written in the form of a JSON, where you have the relevant informations like this. If you see the version statement like public read get object, I'm giving everyone the S3 get object for my bucket name. I'll be placing this with my bucket name. So let me get over here. I'll be pasting the content and my bucket name. I can get it from the URL. Placing here. I'm stating that across the internet, whoever trying to access, please give that access on the bucket. So this is the permission I'm going to give on this particular bucket. You can restrict that on the principle. You can restrict that with the limited users whenever you are doing an actual implementation for a project. And object ownership, as we discussed, bucket owner will be the object owner. Access control list we are disabled right now. And CORS is nothing but cross origin resource sharing. If there are any other what do you say, API gateways and all, then they try to access these applications. So then this cross origin resource sharing will be utilized. So this configuration can be written in the form of a JSON, where client web applications that are loaded in one domain, they want to utilize this in another domain, then they can utilize this. Okay, so let me get into the management section. So in the management sections, as we discussed earlier, these are the lifecycle rules. So we can create a lifecycle rules which states that what is a lifecycle rule and what is the file type and what should happen, like move current version of the objects between the storage classes you can select, and like what you can do after a number of days. Like for example, after 45 days, I want to move it to some kind of what do you say, glacier deep dive. So this kind of life cycle rules you can create. So you can just have that rules written on this particular bucket, so that it will go ahead and apply to the objects and move your storage objects to a different storage classes. That will reduce your costs. So replication rules is nothing but if you want to replicate your data into a different bucket, you can have this. So inventory configuration gives you the list of the files in a kind of a flat file format, with list of all the files that are present recursively on your folders and all. And coming back to metrics, it gives you what is your total bucket size and what is the total number of objects present. So all those it will be present. And access point, so these access points are unlike your S3 bucket URLs. These access points create uh, a point from which an endpoint on your AWS, so that other applications can use it. Like for example, if you want to access this S3 bucket using a VPC endpoint, you can utilize this access point, where you can give a point name rather than using the bucket name. You can give this access point and use within your applications. Okay, so let me give you a what do you say, a small demo on this static web hosting. For static web hosting, what I'm trying to do is I'll be enabling this. As we see, we have already enabled this static web hosting. So you can get this static web hosting on this particular URL. Okay, when you configure your bucket as static web hosting, the website is available at the AWS region specific endpoint, but for this you can get it over here. Okay, so let me, as we said, like there should be index.html. Let me create a new index.html and upload this. Okay, so let me have my index.html got created. So this is my index.html which I'll be uploading. It's a simple hello world that I'll be printing. So let me get into this, click on upload. It will be asking, let me upload this particular file into that. This is my index.html, uploading, just click upload. This will be uploaded very fast. So once that is uploaded, close this, get into the properties, and under properties you will be having the URL from which you can browse your website, static website. So click on this, you can see, press enter. Now you can see the hello world. Okay, so let me try to update this hello world to something else and also verify the versioning of that particular file. Okay, so let me get over here in the place of hello world, I'll do as manage AWS DevOps training. So let me save it, just check whether it has been updated. Okay, it's updated. So now let me update this also. So I'll try to upload the same file again, just add files, click on index.html, and I'll just go ahead and upload. Okay, so that has been uploaded. Let me check if this got changed or not. So it's changed to manage AWS DevOps training. So now let me enable this show versions. In the show versions you can see there are multiple index.html files that have been uploaded and deleted and all, so for prior to this particular testing. And you can see, for example, let us say there is a file for this text.txt. I can see delete this text.txt file. You can see delete objects and close this. And if you try to what do you say, upload the same file again, add the file, and I'm just uploading this text.txt and upload, and just close this. And if you just click on this and show versions, you will see the complete details of this, like you have uploaded the text.txt, and then you have deleted text.txt, and then you have uploaded the text.txt again. So in the similar fashion, prior to this training I was teaching, and then I have also uploaded this index.html, then deleted, and for this current today's training I have uploaded this again, and I have what do you say, I've deleted and uploaded again. So all this informations will be present if you show the versions. And for example, if I want to go back to the previous version without editing the file, you can select this and you can make it as what do you say, the existing version as well. So just click on this and you can see this, the properties of that particular file and all, everything will be present on this, the version, what is this particular version and all. So all these things will be present. Okay, you can just click, and then the actions you can just download and check. So that's how all this information that will be present on the versioning. This is very much useful, like for example, if you want to go back to the previous versions of the file, so this is how you can just check, show versions. It will give all the versions that are available for this particular file. So this is what generally the static web hosting speaks about. So this is how you can host your websites using the S3 bucket. It's only static. If you want to introduce some JavaScripting or backend mechanism, so this S3 bucket would not be ideal solution. But if it's a blogging something where you just want to show your, like for example, if you are a chef and just want to show your recipes, so then you can utilize this S3 bucket and write your neat index.html with .css and all, and then you can just utilize this to show that. So this is how this what do you say, demo for this AWS S3 work. So we can see more couple of use cases where we'll be uploading some or doing some use cases, especially on course or something. So if you click on management, so there is some interesting concept of course. If you get into the properties, to say permissions, you can get a cross origin resource access, because if you are trying to access a JavaScript based from this S3 bucket, if you want to access some other what do you say, when you are doing a get or post request, so this cross origin resource sharing comes into picture. So this we are going to see as a part of use case. We are going to utilize a lot of options on this S3 when we are doing the real-time use cases. But try to understand this S3 is a storage solution. This will be utilized for many of the use cases for this. And there are access point we have already discussed. So these are much like other features that are present on this. You can just try exploring that. But for current use case, so this should be ideal for going ahead for the AWS DevOps training. But whenever we are solving the real-time use cases, a lot of options on this will be discussed and a lot of options on this will be utilized. Thanks for attending. We'll just join in the next lecture. Thank you.